And we're live.
Hello.
Hi there.
Let's wait a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And let people log in. And let people log in.
We've got a bit of echo.
All right.
Thanks, Taha. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I think we should give it a go and start. So, look, thanks for being here. I'm Azeem Zainulbhai, and I've already had a tech malfunction. Hopefully that won't happen a lot today, but in case it does, I apologize in advance. But I'm one of the co-founders of Outsized and the chief product officer, and it is great to see so many of you guys here tuning in from across the globe. And today, as the title suggests, we're going to be venturing into the very intriguing world of flexible talent in our region, in the MENA region. And to do that, we're going to break the session down into a couple of parts. First, we've got a presentation lined up for you to give you a little bit of a rundown on the types of freelancer personas there are, both globally and in the region. Then we're going to talk about the evolving model that the enterprises use to unlock that flexible talent. Again, we'll talk about it globally and in the region. We'll then deep dive into the more unique aspects of our region, specifically around the talent infrastructure and how that's evolving. And then finally, we'll end off with a Q&A session where we can hear from you. So please don't be shy, make comments, ask questions. I may pull up a question or two even before the Q&A if it's relevant to the sections. But I'll be moderating, but my two co-hosts or panelists on this are really experienced guides to help us navigate through this this uncharted terrain, or actually they've been charting the course out for the last couple of years. Vikram is our go-to MENA guy, and he has his finger on the pulse of the business landscape here in the region. And then Anurag is our global business sage, as we like to call him. And he brings a wealth of knowledge from around the world, and he'll help us paint a little bit of a bigger picture. So the aim really for tonight is, while we'll be doing some one-way and some two-way conversations, the idea is that you should leave here with some actionable insights and kind of practical tips to help you navigate this, either as a freelancer or as an enterprise trying to build a flexible talent model. And I think, to kick things off, why don't I let Anurag, why don't you start with an introduction about yourself?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Global business sage. I don't think I've heard that one before, but I have the grey hair for it, and maybe I'll update my LinkedIn profile with that title. So good to see everyone. Thank you for your time today. Excited for the event. Lots of great topics that I'm very passionate about. So my background, I was co-founded Outsized 6 years ago. So I've been helping run the business with my colleagues here for the last 6 years. First of all, ran our India business, now look after the overall APAC business. Through my career, I've done a lot of work across Asia, Africa, Middle East, both when I was at large corporates and in consulting, and now building out Outsized as a growth company. And really excited to contribute today.
Awesome, thank you. And Vikram, the big man in the room.
Thanks, Azeem. I'm the follower of the sage, as they say. Based in Bahrain, I've been in the Middle East region for close to 20 years. I was a banker for almost 18 years, and subsequently shifted to the exciting world of the startup world. I've been with Outsized for 2.5 years, very gratifying 2.5 years, exciting 2.5 years, and happy to be sharing more about what we've been doing. Thanks, Azeem.
Thank you. So look, let's get started. And Anurag, why don't you start by talking us through some of the personas that we're seeing globally?
Fantastic, thank you. So if by magic, I think someone's going to help me flash up some, look at that. That's just so smooth. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the independent talent personas that exist out there. And then a little bit about the actual models that large enterprises are deploying in this space and why. I think the first point I just wanted to make on this initial slide is that for a long time, people have been talking about, and still talk about, oddly, the future of work. And a lot of it just dominates around remote or hybrid, But what we're going to be talking about is something that's already happening. It's happening now, right? And it's happening at scale and it's accelerating. And we obviously at Outsized believe it is absolutely where the market's going to go. So let's first of all talk about the independent talent personas that we see in the market today. So if we could just shift to the next slide. Okay, so the first thing to pick up, and I just wanted to make a point around, which is there've been some permanent shifts. So a lot of people talk a lot about COVID, but there's been permanent shifts in the market for a number of reasons, a number of drivers that have essentially not only created but accelerated the growth of what we call the professional independent talent segment. What we mean by professional independent, right? The first thing is to say that if you look at the gig economy as people talk about it, and the term itself is not the best term, but people understand it. The traditional gig economy has essentially been dominated by two core segments. What we can call sort of your bottom of the pyramid skills, so your commoditized skills, your low skill, low value skills, right? And very much in the micro gig space. So these are micro gigs, small task-based engagements, and usually of a low value, and usually in a commoditized high volume transactional model. And then you've got your sort of senior advisory space where a lot of people have operated, where they've had careers, they've retired, and then they come back into the market as gig workers providing ad hoc advisory. What we're talking about in the professional independent segment are people in their careers, right? Both beginning, middle, and growing their careers. 3 to 15, 3 to 20 years of experience. And this is that emerging segment, high quality, high levels of skills, high value skills. And this is the segment that's traditionally been what you might call your employed workforce. And this is the segment that's being significantly disrupted. And what's driving that? People's relationship towards work has changed through a number of reasons, mainly because a lot of people have seen the fact that job security, that myth of a permanent job being secure, is somewhat being burst. Everyone has seen that in the market for their own eyes. People no longer identify themselves through their brand, through the company. They more identify with their skills and their capability and their knowledge and their experience. And in the market that we operate in now, what's more valued over longevity and job title is the portfolio of skills, knowledge, and experience, and the accumulation of that as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that is not in a traditional working environment. It's through project-based work. So that's the first thing. People's relationships have changed. And people are also demanding a different way of working, more control. I want to choose who I work with, when I work with them, and the type of work that I do. So the driver of control. So the accumulation of skills, a changing relationship at work, and a desire for control over your own career. And all of that is really driving people to enter this market at pace. Connected to that, demand for independent talent, we're going to talk about that, is growing significantly. So that also creates an opportunity for people to say, well, now I can actually go and work as an independent, earn good rates, have that control, build my portfolio, get broad variety of experiences, and I can get paid very well for it. So that component of the demand growing has enabled that market to really accelerate. So let's talk about who these people are. Often when we came to market 6 years ago, clients used to say to us, well, who are these people? Like, why are they doing this? Do they exist? Are they actually here in my market? And we used to tell them, yeah, absolutely, they exist. And in fact, if you look around your office, a lot of them look a lot like these people right here today. And hey, maybe it might even be you one day, right? And you could see the sort of eyes glinting saying, actually, maybe this could be for me, right? So who are these people? Let's talk through some of these personas. And this is a piece of work that we're working on at the moment. There's a number of different types of personas that we can just quickly run through. So I've given them obviously nice and fun names. That's what we like to do. So the first one, early adopters. So these are people that are already moved into the independent professional segment. They are already doing it, and they moved early. They saw this opportunity. They moved into the space, and they've just been building their careers off the back of it. Okay, and for them, it's like, well, I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been doing this for 10 years. Why is everyone only waking up to it now? Obviously, in growth markets, this sort of market hasn't existed as much as it has done in sort of UK, US, European markets. And so a lot of these early adopters were absolutely that, early adopters, going against traditional models of work. And then you've got your converted. So if the early adopters have seen the light early, you've got the converted. These are people that are sitting there within an organization and have had careers their whole life. They've had traditional careers and worked in a permanent model their whole lives. And what they're starting to do is they're starting to look around their teams and see a lot of people who are independents, who are working as independents, who seem to be able to focus on the work, right? Come in, deliver great work, get a great experience, not deal with some of the politics and the complexities that maybe an individual has to deal with in a permanent environment, and then can move on at the end of that engagement and go again. And they've sort of looked at that and said, hey, maybe that could be for me. And they've looked at the market and said, hey, I've got great skills. I've accumulated great knowledge. I can go and take myself out in the market and do extremely well. So you've seen this converted segment who've really seen the opportunity around them and also in the market, and are now jumping into the market. So a lot of independents will actually, and we work with a lot of independents that do their first project through Outsized. Then you've got the disrupted. I call that pushed off the ship. So we all see it on LinkedIn. We all see it in our markets. People, unfortunately, losing their jobs, being disrupted, right? For no fault of their own, highly skilled individuals, but demand drops, market changes, right? We're living in a very unpredictable, volatile environment. People get disrupted. At that point, it was never in their plan to be an independent. They were happy in their careers. They were doing well. They enjoyed the environment. But it gives them an opportunity to pause. Before they jump straight back into the perm market, they pause and say, hey, this happened to me once. This happened to me twice. How else can I take control of my career? What are the other opportunities out there? And suddenly they see a significant amount of opportunity for them to change, again, the way that they build their careers. So you're seeing a lot of these disrupted individuals no longer going back into the permanent workforce, having been burnt once, twice, or even 3 times, and now building out their independent careers themselves where they're in control. They can't be the victims of an organization's whim. Then you've got the returners. So a mixture of personas here. So you could have someone that's left the workplace to go and, say, build a family. You could have someone that's left the workplace to go and pursue education, MBA, executive MBA, training, qualifications, personal development. You could have someone that's left the workplace to pursue an adventure, right? Traveling. You could have someone that's left the workplace to pursue a startup, a new venture. So you've got a lot of people that actually leave the workplace for periods of time. Now, on their re-entry, when they're ready for a comeback, traditionally they would have gone, hey, I need to find a job. I need to go and apply for permanent jobs. Now what they're saying is, hey, I have an opportunity to completely reshape and rethink about how I go back to work. And let me go about it on my terms. And a lot of them now are coming back, not looking for permanent roles, but looking for contractual project-based work. And then you've got your gap fillers. So these are the people that are essentially just biding their time. They've, for whatever reason, left their current role. They're thinking about what they want to do next. They've got no time focus in terms of when they need to go back into the market. And while they're thinking about what they want to do next, they take on some project-based work. They can either get hooked into that, or they can potentially go back into the permanent market or do something completely different. So these are people that are doing it to fill some time, a gap in their careers where they're considering what their next move is. You've got the hustlers. This is a increasing segment. We see this a lot. These are the people that have a number of passions. And instead of saying, hey, I'm going to wait till I'm retired to pursue my passions or set up that business or launch that, e-commerce thing with my partner or my friend, they want to do everything now. So what they're doing is they're saying, well, how can I do everything now? How can I push 3 passion projects, potentially start a new venture, and make sure that I've got some secure income? So project-based works really helps with people that have multiple revenue streams, are trying to create a portfolio of work, a portfolio of passions, and do many different things at the same time, but still secure their financial lives and keep themselves in the market. In-betweeners. So these are people that are just pragmatic. They don't care whether it's permanent, whether it's project-based, whether you call them an independent, whether you call them a permanent employee. They'll just go to where the best work is. Where's the best work? Who's the best organization to work with? What's the most interesting role? I don't care if it's perm. I don't care if it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. I'm just going to follow where the interesting work is. And so this is the shift in the market, where previously we'd see 2 markets, a perm market, an independent market. Now you just see people saying, hey, where are the interesting pieces of work? And the contractual model is the contractual model, because 6 months in the permanent role is no more less secure, right? 6 months contract is no more less secure than a permanent job, right, anymore. You're only really secure for the next 6 months, whether you've got a permanent job or not. Lifestylers. So these are people that actually want to completely change their relationship to work. They want to decide, hey, I only want to work 6 months of the year, or I want to choose when I work. I want to choose when I come into the market, when I leave the market. I want to be very selective around what types of work I do, where I base myself, what types of organizations. So these are the people that are able to actually change their lifestyles and are able to make work move around their lifestyle choices, as opposed to them shifting their lifestyle around work. So these are people that are really changing the game. And then you've got the newcomers. These are people that are coming into the market, 2-3 years experience. They're like, what's the big deal? What's so innovative? This just makes sense. Why would I work any differently, right? So these are the new workers, the new cohort that's coming to the market. And the interesting thing to think about, if there's any individuals out there that are leading businesses, running businesses, especially those in senior talent roles, all these people, as well as your perm cohort, are sitting in your organizations today. How you manage the different personas, right, is going to be critical to success or failure.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Anurag. And obviously you could tell, the level of depth that we've built to understand these different personas as the independent talent market has evolved over the last 5 years. I mean, it was very different when Anurag started and when I started and when Vikram started, and we've seen this shift. So Vikram, maybe now that we have this idea of the global perspective in the markets that we operate in, which personas do you think are the most relevant for MENA at the moment? And do you see any shift in that between now and 2-3 years from now?
Absolutely, Azeem. Thanks, Anurag. I think that was very detailed and very important. So Azeem, from MENA perspective, it's a market which is taken to freelancing, I would say, a little later than the Western or the Southeast Asian market. So it's still at the nascent stage. As a consequence, we've seen, initially we saw a lot of disruptors joining, the disrupted, who were kind of, because of the circumstances, it was COVID time, and around the same time, there was a lot of consolidation, workforce was being made redundant. So that was the flavor. But we've seen a steady shift since the last 18 odd months. A lot of converted tribe has started joining, the persona of converted, which is voluntarily taking the shift And that's driven, when we talk to them, they say it's because of work-life balance, which is obviously predominant in people's minds after COVID. And also, one clear factor that has emerged is that people are keen to work on projects which are priority projects for organizations. I've heard this a lot from from freelancers and independent professionals that I've spoken to, that they toiled hard over 6-8 months and then the project was deprioritized. And that's not a very good feel that they're left with. I see this trend emerging that people want to be aligned to a project which has a definite success quotient attached to it. They've put everything they've had, their expertise, their name behind it. They want to build their CVs. Besides the CVs, is the gratification of having been on a team that's completed a job. So I think that's the trend we've noticed. There's another interesting trend that's emerging, that is that of returners, which Anurag was speaking about. People have been on sabbaticals. That's an accepted norm in lots of corporates nowadays. When they return, they feel different. They want more flexibility. So they're joining the independent professional tribe. Along with that, a lot of homemakers who were preoccupied with important things like bringing up kids, or have taken a break for some reason. We're seeing a lot of very talented homemakers return to the workforce. So this is a trend that we're noticing, and obviously hustlers are always supreme. They will always remain. I hope I've been able to address that question.
Yeah, Vikram, and you're a hustler, man. You're the one who actually fits that mold. I think it's very interesting that the comment you made around the around our flexible talent really valuing being on the most high priority project at an organization. I mean, that's something that we don't talk about enough, but especially when it comes to, let's call it this kind of professional independent segment, that's such a strong driver. Look, I know we spent more time than we should have on the freelancer persona side. Why don't we move and spend some important amount of time on the enterprise side and the different types of models that enterprises have to be able to engage with the flexible talent. And again, to do that, let me welcome Anurag to present a little bit before we ask questions.
Great, thanks, Azeem. If we could flash up a slide, look at that, even before I said anything. Azeem, Vikram, do shut me up if I'm going on too long. So just interject. I get very into these topics, so do just interject. So let's talk about independent talent archetypes. What do you mean by archetypes? What models are large organizations taking to actually trying to win in the independent talent market? And I assure you, organizations are strategically thinking about how they transform their workforces and make significant shifts in the makeup of their workforces to increase the amount of the professional segment, the professional individuals they have in their workforce, shifting from sometimes in Asia, Africa, Middle East, you could say there's probably under 5%, even 5% would be probably overstating it, probably 2-3% of a organization's professional workforce would be independent. Senior leaders within organizations are pitching for 20-30% of their workforce to be independent. Why? Because organizations, for them to win in the markets that we're going to operate and continue to operate in, which are highly volatile, need flexible, resilient capabilities and talent models. So they can respond to market competitive dynamics quickly and ensure that they're able to maintain their relevance and market leadership. So the first thing to say is leading organizations, C-suite leaders have taken this as a strategic objective. It's on their strategic objectives, right? And linked to this bullet point too, for the first time, and I think rightly so, all the eyes are on the CHRO, human capital leaders and talent leads. They've been demanding a seat at the table for a long time. And unfortunately, especially in our markets, these leaders are often seen as administrators as opposed to strategic leaders. And finally, what we're seeing is, as we've seen talent being at the center of an organization's success and your ability to be the employer of choice and create models that allow you to deliver business outcomes effectively, the CHRO has now absolutely got the seat at the table. And the C-suite are looking at them saying, how are you going to help build a new model to ensure that we succeed in the market? So great timing to be in those roles, but also a lot of pressure to have the answers. in a market that is still relatively unstructured, right? Where organizations are still trying to find their feet. And so what we've seen is organizations and large enterprises, and we talked to obviously our senior leadership stakeholders at large organizations across the region. When we talk to them about how we're approaching it, we see three common approaches. And although we see probably some of these having a slight edge in terms of how optimum they can be, there are benefits, right? There are justified choices for each of these archetypes. So let's take each of them one by one. So command and control. So command and control is where an organization, often an organization that's dipping their feet, right? They're saying, let's try this out. But usually these organizations will be in highly regulated environments with a lot to lose as well as a lot to win. And their maturity level in terms of their thinking and experience in operating in the independent talent market and building new models is minimal. And so to take that first step, but in a very controlled and risk-managed way, they take this archetype, which is command and control. Azeem will be talking about these in more detail, but these are essentially highly centralized, highly controlled models and processes, essentially driven by risk mitigation. So the answer here is, hey, if we do nothing, as long as we don't bring risk into the organization, we're okay, right? So let's only do things if we can essentially mitigate all the risks, right? The second archetype, results at all costs. This is sort of the flip to that. This is an organization that's just said, we have a burning platform. We need to do something right now, right? We need to react. We need to solve this problem. We need to leverage this independent capability to succeed and deliver today, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on speed. We're going to focus on actually just getting into this market, leveraging the market and start using it. And we're going to find our way and we're going to take that risk because the business outcome, the actual downside of not doing it is significantly more than the risk of actually going and doing it, right? Characteristic of this organization is highly distributed, right? So this is where senior stakeholders and stakeholders across the business can engage in this market and do things in this market, right, based on their need. And it's very much driven by the business stakeholder with not a lot of central function control or oversight. And indeed, without giving away some stakeholders are in this space, avoiding central functions or indeed treating central functions as an end administrator. And again, we'll talk about this in a bit more detail. And then you've got your delayed gratification. So these organizations have said, yes, we have a burning demand, but actually we have a strategic ambition here for the long term. We want to do this sustainably. We want to commit now. We're ready to commit to this new model. And so let's do it properly, because once we open the gates, the business are just going to go. So what they do here is combine with business, combine with central functions. They look to ensure that they deliver business needs. Their priority is delivering business outcomes, and therefore creating processes and controls and infrastructure that enables business to achieve their outcomes in a consistent way and in a way that can be managed effectively, right? These are also organizations that are thinking proactively in more 6, 12, 18-month type horizons, as opposed to your archetype 2, which is thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks horizon, right? What do I need right now? What do I need this month, next month, right? So this is an organization that's slightly ahead in terms of maturity of strategic ambition. Senior leaders have really committed on the ROI story and want to build this for the long term and invest in the infrastructure. Now I'm going to actually hand over to Azeem here to talk actually about the variables that define how an organization may fall into one of these archetypes.
Yeah, thanks, Anurag. And we've had some experience over the last 5 years dealing with people in different modes, different companies that are in different modes. We've had experience helping companies change when it fits their organizational need. And one of the things that we've seen, hey, can you flash that that slide back up on screen, Sydney? Thanks. Yeah. So one of the interesting things that that we see is it really depends on a couple of factors, and there's 4 factors that it generally depends on that helps understand where you will fall at any given time as an enterprise. And that is speed and quality kind of on one side of the axis, and control and risk on the other side of the axis. And a lot of times what we've seen, interestingly enough, is it's not just about where the organization lies, but it's where the senior leaders within the organization, which senior leaders in an organization are holding power right now. And it can happen for a variety of reasons where, crap, we're behind on revenue and we really need to push things fast and we don't have enough resources, and you get people at the speed and quality. And so the sales guru like Anurag would be, pushing to get speed and quality and resources fast. And then on the other hand, hey, something may have happened, right? There may have been a big regulatory risk that has emerged. And all of a sudden, there's a huge amount of pressure on control and risk. And so both of these give you that if you look at one extreme or the other, command and control is dominated by control and risk, and results at all costs is dominated by speed and quality. The delayed gratification, which I think we prefer, we kind of look at it almost as if you were like I look at it, I'm the CPO, so I look at it as the way we look at product, which is the central functions are there to support the needs of the business. And so you can do quality control, you can do control and risk, but the thing that you're trying to enable is ultimately getting the guys on the line who need resources today to be able to execute that fast. And so what we've seen is in delayed gratification, speed actually increases. There might be 2 or 3 months where people are trying to figure it out, but speed ultimately for that end user that needs the flexible talent increases. So I'll stop there. Anurag, was there anything else you wanted to say on this, or can I have a question for Vikram on the region about this?
Yeah, no, I really like how you frame that. It's just the last point I'll just quickly make on this, which is you've got the archetypes, and then you've got depth of breadth of adoption, right? You've got how deep an organization is actually going and how broad within an organization. That's really driven by a few things. Is there a strategic ambition? What is the scale of that? 2, what is the maturity level and confidence to actually go and commit? And then you've got, hey, have I spent the time to actually present my tangible ROI, my business case, right, to drive this? Now I'm seeing it, here, but am I measuring it, and am I demonstrating the ROI, right? And the organizations that are doing those things, setting a strategic ambition, building their maturity, and actually have a commercial case here, right, are the ones that are really adopting this at scale.
Thanks, Anurag. So Vikram, you've been with us and you've seen all 3 of these models. Tell us, what is the most commonly adopted model, and what are the trends in those models that you're seeing in your client base in the region?
Right. So Azeem, Middle East is pretty much mimicking the rest of the world. However, there are some subtle changes. Some of them are because of cultural reasons. Some of them are because of the maturity of the market. And I must also add the maturity of the projects or the organization, right? What stage is the organization at? But predominantly, what I've noticed and what we've seen is that command and control, where the CEO's office is running the shop with one-downs like executive PMOs, initiative management offices. So this is a popular skill set that we are asked for. And when we query and engage with organizations, the answer is that these are large projects. Middle East is going through a mega transformation on the public and private sector. There's rapid transformation of banks. There's digitization of ministries, and it's a mega rollout. So the magnitude of these projects, in a way, also determines that the CEO's office is very actively engaged. Obviously, the CEO is doing a lot of other things, but they do have a team. So obviously, I would say in the Middle East at this point of time, there's command and control, which is the predominant model. We are seeing a subtle shift also towards delayed gratification, where, as I mentioned, the maturity of the organizations is of paramount importance when they decide. So there are certain organizations where there's no dearth of business. All the levers are in sync, and that's where they're exploring the independence of business and central working together, as the model spells out. So it's yeah. So that's really in a nutshell what we're witnessing in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's really interesting, I guess, because compared to other parts of our geographies, like where where Anurag is, or where our colleagues in South Africa are, the projects that independent consultants are working on, in the professional independent talent is working on in the region, are really, really big projects. That's not to say we don't do that in other places, but consistently across the board, it's been a lot bigger sized projects. That's really interesting. And I think that will help us slightly transition into the next topic, which is more about the infrastructure for talent in the Middle East, right? And I think what would be helpful, Vikram, is for you to just give us a little bit of an overview on, like, what does that infrastructure look like to be able to sign up regional talent? Are there regulatory issues that we need to consider? Are there other constraints? Sure. And also, what are the opportunities?
Absolutely. Can I just request someone to just flash the slide? So, yeah, Azeem, I think I've just listed some of my thoughts on this. The MENA region is, as I mentioned, going through a metamorphosis of kinds. It's a quantum leap. So it's not that technology is changing step by step. That is obviously calling for a lot of talent. And one obvious outcome is that there is a skill gap. There's a demand-supply gap. Because of the kind of skill set that's been sought in the Middle East, we notice that there is a distinct skill gap. So, this talent is obviously, we have solutions, we're porting it globally. People are very happy to come to the Middle East for obvious reasons like sound infrastructure, safety, no tax, and the other benefits that go along with that. I mean, that is one of the big pulls, to be honest. And Middle East also offers consultants. We've seen amongst the various regions we work in, the longest tenor of contracts, at least from our experience over several hundred projects, that the tenor of projects typically that are offered in the Middle East are anywhere between 6 to 18 months, and renewable projects. So, that myth of being secure and working on something you don't like working, deprioritization, politics, all that is out. People are very happy. And so that's really, I was talking about the constraints, but it's in a way a benefit as well in the Middle East. So there's a skill gap. One of the major constraints that the Middle East talent market is facing is when you import talent, there is a lag time, and that lag time is about 45 to 60 days. And that is because of the stringent processes and paperwork that's needed to get work permits. Currently, Middle East does not have free portability of talent coming in and just starting plug and play, right? It is about getting a work permit. Often you have to go through a third-party agency to get that work permit. And this also has a lot of pre-work where there's attestation of documents. So it's no different than a permanent move, right? So that is something which is currently a big constraint in the Middle East for flexible talent to move. But once they've overcome that hurdle, it's easier. I would advise everybody who plans to look at Middle East to get their certifications attested in advance, irrespective of whether currently you have a project or not, because that you can get done. It'll save you 35, 40 days of earning, right? And the last one is that within the region, there are requirements for Arabic-speaking talent. And we see that there's a dearth of talent in technology, transformation, strategy kind of roles, right, in the Middle East. So having spoken about the constraints, if permitted, can I just address how the local market is trying to address them quickly?
Yes, please.
So in the local market, we are seeing a lot of positive steps that are being taken by the governments. They are promoting flexible talent by introducing freelancer visas, for example, in Dubai. But currently they are restricted to creative fields like art, photography, highly specialized artistic talent. But that's the beginning. As we hear, it's a very dynamic market. They're changing. The other markets like Qatar, Bahrain are adopting that. Saudis come up with a shorter term visa. So things are happening. They are inviting global talent on a long-term basis also. They're saying if you have certain skill sets which are well sought out in the markets, we are going to give you priority skilled visas, right? Which are long-term, 3-year, 4-year visas, just because of the specialized skill set that an individual carries. Creating digital infrastructure and skill development via trainings, education, financial support is being done by all governments. They are promoting entrepreneurship along with providing several, aiding factors. One of them is finance, long-term, soft loans, and infrastructure as well. They almost sponsor 50% of the cost for anybody in the Middle East who wants to start up and do. Obviously, this is for locals, but they are increasingly opening up the market so that this also has a byproduct of employment. And that's the way they are looking at it. The oil-based economies are trying to transition to non-oil-based revenues. So it's a part of the overall vision as well. And inviting companies to set up development centers in the region is being followed by most of the countries: Qatar, Bahrain, Dubai. They're inviting mega corporations of the world to come and set up their development centers here. Once the cascading effect is that, then you need the talent, and a lot of that talent is going to be freelance as well, as we see. And as I mentioned earlier, that they're not doing anything to the tax benefits. So a person working in anywhere in the world is shelling out a significant part of the daily, monthly, or annual wage as a tax. Over here, all goes towards the saving. So this is a big pull for the flexible market. I hope. Happy to take any questions at the end in the Q&A. But these are the guiding factors in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. We know that there's a lot of constraints and on visa time to actually get a permit and things like that. But the benefits are amazing, and the projects are also amazing. And so we're seeing this really interesting differential between some of the rest of the world, where the region is trying to attract talent and trying to do things that will attract this talent. I mean, it's very rare that you get high quality freelancer visas easily in other regions that we work in, let alone the tax benefits, which that alone is an amazing benefit. My God, especially for people who are spending 35 to 45% of income tax at the in the bracket that these professional independents are usually going to be paying. So yeah, go ahead, Vikram. You had something to say? Sorry.
No, I was just trying to say that this is here to stay, because when you look at it from a distance, it's media talking about NEOM, media talking about Vision 2030, and various one is skeptical. How can this be happening? When we're supplying talent, we're deploying talent to those projects, right? So I say with a lot of conviction that this is real money. This is a real big change that's happening, and Middle East has never had it better for freelancers.
Listen, thanks for that, Vikram. I thought maybe just very quickly, Anurag, I know that this is one area where our regions differ the most in the regions that Outsized operates in. Are there any lessons or trends that you've seen in other markets, be it Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Africa, that you think might be applicable to what's happening in the Middle East? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe there's some lessons that we can take in these other regions from the Middle East.
Yeah, I think the visa piece cannot be understated. So Southeast Asia, if I focus in on on Southeast Asia, the great thing about Southeast Asia and trying to operate as an organization in Southeast Asia is you've got access to talent from multiple markets in very close time zones, and lots of sort of ability to transfer skills, knowledge, experience across those markets. So you aren't just operating in, hey, I need to look at the talent within my country. I can actually look at the whole region. And most organizations will have a regional play, right? But not all countries within Southeast Asia are embracing the freelancer visa, like the Middle East, are really innovating in this space. And I love to see that, because it's a huge enabler. I'll give you an example. In Malaysia recently, and great job on the Malaysian government for doing this, they've recently launched a freelancer visa. And off the back of that, we've been able to help our clients, big enterprise clients in Malaysia, tap into a much bigger talent pool quickly because of that visa. We've been able to deploy independent talent from Australia, from the rest of Southeast Asia, who can go and work in Malaysia within 2 to 3 weeks and be there for up to a year. It can get renewed up to a year and work there as an independent. And they've created a great model for it, great process for it. And then you could just see the impact straight away that visa's done in terms of value creation for its market, bringing in talent, helping drive organizations to actually be able to grow and avoid that sort of lack of talent pool, that talent gap, which we all know is the biggest detriment, the biggest impact to value creation within an organization is the lack of capabilities to deliver strategic outcomes, right? The strategic agenda, the business plans that have been created. Most organizations know what they need to do, have done great thinking. It all comes to the execution. And all the execution comes to is, do I have the right capabilities? That's the critical component. And if I can't access the right capabilities, my project won't, and my initiative will not deliver the business case, the outcomes it's supposed to do, or it will take a lot longer, or it may never deliver it, or deliver a suboptimal outcome. And therefore the value I create is less, and therefore my growth is impacted. And then there's bigger socioeconomic impacts to that. So actually, the small component of innovation around visas is a huge unlocking of this market. And I think the more we see governments taking that step and taking that lead from a lot of the innovations happening in the Middle East, the better.
Yeah, so it's almost, I would say there's a little bit of learning from each market. I think, Southeast Asia market could, I'm saying this to somebody who lives in Singapore, could learn a little bit from, from the UAE and Bahrain in terms of tax rates. And then on the other side, you guys could learn a little bit more, or I should say we could learn a little bit more about, about the visa situation. Well, excellent, guys. Thank you very much for that. That's kind of like the planned portion. And what we have now, we'll open it up to questions. I know we got a couple of questions in the comments, and we've had other people feed us questions through WhatsApp and others. So let me ask you guys a first question to just kick this off. I think what's really tough for people is to understand. This is more on the enterprise side, but it reflects the, I think freelancers and independent talent should understand this as well. How is it that we can more easily measure the success and impact of the talent models on our business outcomes? Like, how do you link those two, and how do you make it, make it known what the impact is?
So I'm happy to sort of kick off here, and then Vikram, I'd love to hear your views as well, or Azeem indeed. So let me talk about a few simple things. So the first thing is a little bit about what I just talked about, which is organizations have clear value creation plans, right? Their business plan, their strategy. Those strategies get delivered through initiatives and projects, right? Those projects are delivered by people, right? Perm, contract, independent, whatever you might want to call it. They're delivered by talent, by people with capabilities and skills. If those initiatives and projects do not deliver each of their outcomes that they're supposed to deliver within the time frame and within the budget they're supposed to deliver in, the organization will ultimately fail. So their business plan of hitting their metrics will not be met. And most organizations will accept that their business plans and their strategic objectives, obviously there's market dynamics, but a lot of it will be around, can they execute the strategy? And that boils down to, can they execute the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 projects that ultimately feed into that strategy effectively? And the big driver of successful projects is getting the right capabilities, but quickly. And the speed and the right capabilities quickly is the big thing. So if we talk about, let's take the current perm market versus the independent market. And obviously, the first point is you can put metrics around that, right? By leveraging independent talent, by getting the right capabilities I don't have, right? Getting it in quickly at the right time, you can measure the impact that has on your project outcomes, your successful project delivery based on historical and future. Then if you just look at it in a more base, simple level, if you take a permanent hiring process today, right? I decide I have a capability that I need to fill. 3 to 6 months later, I managed to get the individual to turn up in my office, right? In the current environment, 3 to 6 months, the business changes, the world changes, the market dynamic changes, the project that needs to be done changes. But let's say that doesn't change and I still need that capability and I still have that engagement. 3 months later, I realize, hey, either I don't need this capability, this isn't the right individual. Okay, so that's potentially 9 months gone. Then another 3 months to actually release that capability. That's 1 year done. The cost of that, both in terms of actual cost and opportunity cost, is significant. And what's happened to my project or the initiative that person or the role that person was supposed to do, it's sitting there, right? It's not delivering value. If I take a similar case of an independent, I decide I have a capability gap, taking away some of the time zones and time frames in other markets like the Middle East. But if I take our experience in Southeast Asia, for example, 5 days later, right, 5 to 10 days later, that person can be in my office. I can assess whether they're able to do the job pretty quickly. If they can't do the job, 10 days later, I can release that capability without any sunk cost, right, without the fixed cost of that. And I go again, right? Or that person is a fit, the project's delivered, I can release that cost and capability and move on to the next capability I need. So the agility, the cost, the speed, right? The commercial case and the business case and the value creation is there. What isn't there as yet is organizations haven't got to the point where they have the metrics in place to measure this stuff. The last thing I'll say is more a core thing, which is, are you becoming the employer of choice for independents? Independents are high in demand. High quality independents are high in demand. They bring great skills, great capability. They're available quickly. Everyone wants to access them, the same people. How are you the employer of choice for independent talent, right? If you're measuring that and if you're putting investment into that, that's another metric that I think is an important one.
Thanks, Anurag. And in fact, I'll add a little bit to that. And Vikram, I wanted to shift your focus a little bit more on the talent side and some of the issues that talent have. So, but before I do that, I just want to add that while it is tough to find the metrics that can help you, the way that I'm coming about at this is when we look at our enterprises and help them think about their talent models, we always get the question of, hey, what metrics do I use? And there's a lot of qualitative arguments that we make, but in my job as CPI, I'm also the data guy, right? And so we try to break this down a little bit into metrics that they can use to help support their journey into better talent models. And one of the things that we talk about is delayed revenue. Okay, like that's the easiest metric that happens. Hey, if we don't get the resources for this project, we will have delayed revenue by X number of months. And that's the easiest thing for a CXO to understand. So for any of you on here that are trying to actually convince your peers or your bosses that you want to move into a more flexible talent model, that is the type of term that really hits people the hardest, right? That gets people's mind flowing, like, oh man, I never want to delay revenue. And then the second thing that happens, especially in large projects, is, hey, how long will it take me to get the right person to get started? And there's a metric for that, right? There's an actual metric that says, what is the day that I realized I had this need to the day the person has actually started on the job? And it's inclusive of everything. It's especially in our region, in the MENA region, it's inclusive of the visa and work permit issues. And people will tell you, oh my gosh, you were able to get somebody on the ground from the day that I knew I needed it to 45 to 60 days later. And that's super fast, especially when compared to perm, right?
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to add quickly that we are overcoming this challenge of time constraints by actually offering remote startup, right? So a person who's based, let's say, in India or in Singapore doesn't have to wait till the time the visa is actually processed. Companies are very happy giving them remote secure access. They start on the project. A lot of projects don't need you to be on the ground or client facing. So that's the shortest, most agile way. The couple of other benefits are that in the Middle East, there's localization costs. The moment you hire perm, you almost have to hire 2 local employees. I mean, so what I'm trying to say is companies are getting smarter. They're getting more nimble. They're taking a hybrid models, and for measuring, they're setting very precise KRAs. Is there a cost save? Is the customer journey improving? Is the customer experience improving as an outcome of this project? So I think all these combined would answer your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a question from the audience that I'd like to ask you. So somebody's asking how mature are these markets in terms of people open to taking up contractual roles instead of permanent ones? And what they mean by that, I'm assuming, because I'm not talking to this person directly, but this is based on what they've messaged. I'm assuming, hey, there are markets where people will take long-term contractual roles instead, like a 12-month or an 18-month even role, instead of a full-time permanent role, even though it acts partially like a full-time role. So in MENA, Vikram, why don't you answer the question in that region, then I'll give it to you, Anurag.
Interesting that this comes up. One of the big consulting firms we work with asked this question. We gave some 4 candidates, and they were all from permanent roles. So they were very quizzical that, what's happening? Why are people leaving a permanent role and coming up? So, just as a build up to the answer, it is that a lot of people have reached a certain level of proficiency in their existing roles. They've done a couple of jobs in similar high flying big organizations. And now the next step is consulting. That's where the growth is, because they're faced with numerous different challenges, numerous different problems, newer clients, where they're selling solutions or implementing solutions. So it's not like a tunnel where you're just doing project for one organization with its limited scope, or maybe a very wide scope, but you're employed on one particular vertical. As far as the maturity, these markets are absolutely up there right now, because you have all the global names that are present anywhere in the world, also operating in Middle East. So from a Middle East perspective, it is the consulting firms and the banks and the various other multinational organizations that are driving this, really. And even the governments are deploying these agencies or these consulting firms to improve processes. So it's pretty standardized, I would say. The market is mature and is absorbing a lot of consultants as we speak.
And Anurag, in your market, what are you seeing in Southeast Asia and South Asia? Anurag, you're on mute.
Apology. So a couple of things. So one, yes, increasingly what we call this contract to hire. So often organizations are saying, hey, I don't want to do long, costly permanent hiring, right? I want to try before I buy, in a way, right? And actually talent are saying the same thing. Do I want to commit to a permanent role where I probably need to stay there 2-3 years, right? Why don't I go and work on a contract for 6-12 months, see what's going on, see what I like, get under the hood and decide whether I then want to commit for the long term. So you're seeing a lot of permanent hiring freezes, but also trying to avoid fixed cost and also de-risk the hiring process by opening up contracts. But it does depend on the market. So I'd say the majority of Southeast Asian markets are very open to this, and talent are increasingly open to this. However, if you take Japan, for example, slower in the take up, a lot more focus on security there, still quite traditional in their views, and from a cultural point of view, still on the early stages of adoption of sort of the independent space. If you take Southeast Asia, though, very much actually shifting away from perm towards contracts, but for roles. And then obviously with project-based work, it's in the main independence delivering those types of engagements.
Thanks, Anurag. I think based on the time, we should do one more question, and I think this question applies both to the freelancer side and independent professional side, as well as the enterprise side, which is, somebody was asking, it's easy for us to it's not easy, but we have to assess the skills that somebody needs for our specific project. But how would you assess the values or their ability to deliver on the business goals, not just their skills? And so when an enterprise is looking, and this is generally typically like a line manager, not the HR finance folk, how do you actually do that? And how do, I think it's probably good for both Vikram, you and Anurag, to answer that, because there's different strategies that we have in the different regions to be able to help our clients do that. Vikram, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to clarify, is this from a client perspective? How do they assess, or how do we assess?
Exactly. Well, it's how do they assess, but we do some of that work for them anyway, so we probably have a good sense of,
So clients obviously have different verticals, and I'm talking about consulting firms as well as banking, because that's where we talk to most of our deployments are there. So they all have subject matter experts. Let's talk agile, right? Agile methodology as an example. They would obviously go by the past track record, by references, shortlist, engage, and they also deploy case studies, which they get the candidates to kind of address. They have a lot of consulting firms are using PPTs as they ask the person to make a presentation and see the logical flow. How adept is the person at explaining, delivering, and presenting, because that's what they need in those areas. And obviously, from a technical perspective, they have subject matter experts who step in and do a deep dive into the skill set. I think these are commonly the processes they follow. Very few organizations deploy psychometrics and those kind of tests also. A certain number of organizations do that, but it's not very prevalent at this point of time.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've seen when we're helping a client to assess a independent talent or flexible talent, we coach them a little bit, and we also see them ask the same type of question to multiple candidates across the board. So the same sets of questions that are, I'm not going to quite call it psychometric, but things that help you evaluate how this person would be acting in certain situations. And you can get interesting outcomes, interesting insights about things like how do they deliver, how do they deal with being in a big team, how do they deal with being in different reporting situations. And those are things that help you align to your values. Like one of our values in Outsized is ownership, right? And we have a series of questions that helps us understand when we hire an employee or a freelancer, will they give us that same sense of ownership? Right now, it's never 100% correct, but those are some of the things that we do. Anurag, what about in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So first thing is we see case type interviews, right? So, hey, rather than interviewing about, tell me about what you did in that job. Tell me about, hey, here's a scenario. How would you solve it? Talk me through how you're structured thinking, how you're going to solve the problem, how you're going to approach it, which brings both subject matter and soft skills to the table, right? And speed of thinking. The second one is show me the specific product. When you're hiring an independent for a piece of work, you're more interested in, have you done this type of work before that I need you to do? Show me that you did it and tell me what outcomes that you actually delivered, but also tell me what you learned so I can learn from that experience, right? So those are the sorts of questions we like. Tell me, show me the project, talk to me about the brief, the scope, the outcomes, how you ran it, what went well, what didn't go well. So it's project-based assessment.
Right? Reflect on what you did and tell me about your reflection. Yeah.
Exactly. The third thing is that speak to previous project sponsors as opposed to line managers. So who did you do that project for? Who was your project sponsor, your project stakeholder? Not who are you reporting to, but who ultimately were you delivering that project for? Let's if we're going to do any reference checking, let's speak to that person, right? So if you're going to do reference checking, speak to the right type of individual, right? Ask for tangible metrics in terms of deliverables of actual project outcomes rather than, I'm a great digital transformation expert. Okay, what does that mean, right? What numbers, what data, but it supports that statement. So looking at actual numbers, right, and quant to support big statements is a useful one, as well. And the other thing is that once you get a trusted independent, leverage them as well. So a good independent can sniff out another good independent. So we've seen a lot of value in our community in terms of our community actually being a big part of our quality gate, right? Within Outsized in terms of attract good individuals, they know good individuals and they want to work with good individuals, right? So you can also tap into that network effect.
Yeah, and I think we get that both on the supply side and on the demand side from you, Vikram, right? We actually learned from you on how to build and maintain a really good network, because the people that are in that network have the power to help you find other parts of the network. Okay, guys, I think we are now a little bit over and out of time. For those of you whose questions I didn't get to, we're very sorry. We'll try to answer those. We'll try to answer those after on chat. But really, thank you guys so much for attending to the audience. Yeah, Vikram, sorry. Yeah.
I'm just seeing some questions which I just can't resist, but inform. I feel obliged to do those. I think there's a question which just come up about different industries and what are the kind of skill sets that are relevant. So the industries that are predominantly changing are actually everything is changing, right from healthcare to public sector units and banking. And that is causing a cascading effect on all supporting industries towards that. The skill sets that we are seeing that are in predominant demand are project managers, who've got a good track record, technology transformation experts. Payments is a very big segment, automation of payments, wallets, digital, transit, anything to do with payments, cross-border payments. And risk professionals are risk is another industry because of the regulatory changes that are coming in. So it could be fraud risk, operations risk, you name it, risk professionals. Middle East is the area. I'm not hard selling Middle East. Please don't take it that way, but I'm just sharing because I think it's also our and even strategy consultants will be evergreen. But having spoken about banking and technology, there are other areas which are also witnessing freelancing. It's like traditional coaching, like you could say life coaches, which are not really our forte, but I see a lot of action in digital marketing, corporate sales. So there's action all across the spectrum. Some of them we obviously cater to, but these are the other functions that are being the industries that are looking for freelance support. And this is global. Some of these are remote, and some of these are on site.
Yeah, in terms of sectors of Southeast Asia, just very quickly, we're seeing financial services, obviously, TMT, big one, right? Telecoms is huge. Healthcare, big sector, lots of growth. Energy, lots of interesting work happening on the energy side. And then ESG is a huge area that actually can touch all of those sectors. So those are some of the top sectors to just cover off that question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been a lot of internal competition because MENA because there's a lack of supply, it's taking talent from other regions as well, and so we'll see internal competition in Outsized for really good talent for PM project managers that have a choice between a Southeast Asia project or a MENA project, and honestly, we kind of know who wins, Vikram, right? MENA wins.
We'll see.
Unfortunately for Anurag. Unfortunately for me. So
there's good talent there.
Thank you very much to both of you for bringing your expertise and giving us a lot to chew on today when it comes to understanding how to leverage the talent pools, the global talent pools, and the MENA enterprise models. And of course, a round of applause to you guys in the audience for coming up with some great questions at the end in the Q&A. And with that, again, really appreciate it. Thank you, and good night, everybody.
Thanks, Azeem. Appreciate it.
Night, Azeem. Thanks a lot. Thanks to the entire team. Appreciate your time.